Hello and welcome to what I think I'm going to call Ground Control Board Games, a YouTube channel hosted by me, Mark Shantos. Today we're going to be talking about my top 100 games as of December 31st, 2023. This is not the first time that I've done a list like this, but it is the first time that I've done it in a video format. I have a podcast called Ground Control to Major Mark that last year I did my top games as of December 31st, 2022, and I kind of found that over the past year, I've increasingly only wanted to talk about board games when I think about doing another podcast. And the thing about board games and podcasting is that you can't see anything, which is fine for certain discussions. I certainly listen to a lot of board game podcasts, but for the top 100 games of all time, a lot of people will have never heard of these games, so it's kind of nice to be able to see something. So that's what we're doing today. Today, we're going to be going through my top 100 board games. This is the first year that I'm able to do this list. Last year was top 62 or 63, I believe. And this year, I've played about 40 new games, as well as remembered 20 to 30 games that I had played in the past but forgot to rank last year. And so I'm at about maybe 120 to 150 games, and a lot of them are duplicates. For example, Terraforming Mars has two versions. There's Terraforming Mars and Terraforming Mars Ares Expedition. And for this list, I'm going to be combining games like that, and you'll see that when we get into the list. So there was about 120 eligible games. Now, with that few games, the reason that I decided to do the top 100 is because I want to keep this an annual tradition, and I want room to grow from here. So I always am going to do the top 100 every year as long as I'm this into the hobby, and I want to be able to grow and see, this year my number 100, it might be a game that I feel kind of okay about, and in the future I'll hopefully have played so many games that even my number 100, I'm like, I love that game. That's an amazing game. With that being said, I hope to talk about only games that I like for a couple of reasons. One, I'm not big on talking about things that I don't like. And also, I hope to be a board game designer one day. And I hope to maintain professionalism. And I want board game designers to be my peers. And I don't want to talk about games that I don't like. I will be criticizing games that I do like, though. And I will be saying negative-ish things about games that I still like despite what I consider to be flaws or things that I don't vibe with. Also in this top 100, I'm going to be telling stories and talking about design and talking about how games affect my mental health and all sorts of things, so it won't just be about the top 100. So a quick look back at 2023, I played a ton of board games this year, and some of my highlights were that I played about 40-ish new games. There is a relatively new, I think 2 years old, a board game cafe here in town, which has really helped out with that. I've gotten a few board game groups together to play new games, to go through campaign games, to just meet up maybe once a month. And a lot of my social time and meeting with people has turned into board games. Typically, if I host something, it's going to be board games. So that's how we fit in so many new games. I also attended my first board game convention, the Great Plains Game Festival. There you can see on the picture to your left. I'm stoked about it, standing there with that meeple. And perhaps the biggest highlight, I've started taking board game design seriously this year. I've been listening to podcasts and videos about board game design. I've been reading about board game design. But most importantly, I've been designing board games. At this point, I have a couple games that were either done or felt done enough that I put it to the side. I've let a couple friends play those, got their thoughts on it. And then me and my good friend and co-designer, Chan Bentz, we started a game called Hike. And this game we've taken pretty far. Not sure how far we will take it, but we are actively working on board game design, and I constantly have a few games coming up. So the first 50 games we'll go through relatively fast. I said that I've only played about 120 board games, so that's why Connect 4 is here making an appearance at number 100. with that being said, Connect 4, not a bad game. Here I'm pictured playing it at the day of my wedding. We took some wedding pictures playing board games with all the groomsmen, so it kind of holds a special place in my heart because of that. Number 99 is a game called Pit. If you've never played Pit, you're rapid firing, trading with a bunch of other players in this game, trying to get a full set of oranges or soybeans or sugar, and there's a bowl going around that I believe you want in your hand if you're going to win, but if you're not going to win, you don't, and it's just complete chaotic trading energy. One more thing that I want to say about Pit is that it's a small box card game, and this year I've begun to realize that I love small box card games. Of course, I like the big Euros and stuff like that too, but as I was going through this list, I realized there's quite a few small box card games. And at number 98, we have another one, which is Rat-a-Tat-Cat. This game is kind of goofy. You have 4 cards in front of you, and you are able to see the 2 on the ends, and then you're drawing from the deck and replacing one of the cards, and some of them have little abilities, and you're trying to get the lowest score possible. A lot of plays that we've gotten from this game are when we are so tired, especially me and my brother-in-law will be so tired, it's like 2 a.m., and we really should just go to bed, but instead we're like, we gotta rip one more game. We gotta play one more board game before bed. So we'll play something like Rat-a-Tat-Cat that's kind of just super easy and fun and goofy. Number 97 is Boggle, which is in a category of games that I'm actually really pretty bad at. These word-finding games. My brain isn't super wired towards that kind of thing, but I still enjoy these type of games. Boggle is a game that you shake up all these letters, and then they all lay in this grid, and you try to find as many words as you can in there. It's a fun game. Number 96 is Munchkin. I need to give this one another shot. I haven't played it in a while. It's a game that you are trying to go through 10 levels in a dungeon, and you have a character that you're switching what race you are, whether you're an elf or a dwarf or a human, and you're switching your weapons and your stats, and you're kind of trying to push your friends and opponents down while you go up in the ranks in this dungeon. And it's just goofy fun. It's pretty random, and that's not a terrible thing, but the game perhaps overstays its welcome for what it is. Number 95 is chess, which putting it here is honestly just straight disrespectful towards the greatest game of all time. I've just never been super into chess, but there it is. In Tinder Blocks, players are building up collectively a small campfire using tweezers. So all the pieces are really tiny, and you are leaning over and picking these up and telling you what these cards that you draw have told you to do. Some of them you have to use your left hand, and you have to place blocks vertically, and then you create this monstrosity of a fire, and then if it knocks over, whoever knocked those pieces over is eliminated. And this game just fits in a small little mint tin, and it's really fun. In 2022, I took a road trip around the country visiting 28 states, and one of those states was Texas, where my car decided to break down, and my girlfriend was with me at the time. And while we were waiting for the car to be fixed, we had a couple games on us, including Tinder Blocks, and we decided to just order a pizza and try not to think too much about the situation we were in, and we played a game of Tinder Blocks, and that's my favorite memory with this game. We ended up turning that day around into being a pretty fun day despite the circumstances. Number 93 is Guess Who. This game, you are trying to guess which character the other player has by asking questions. Do they have brown hair? Do they have blue eyes? I prefer to play it the way that you sometimes see online now, which is the vibes based. Like, would this person be a wizard? You know, could you see this guy / girl being a wizard? That's what I want to know. Number 92 is a game called Guillotine. This is in a collection of a few games that were left over from my bachelor party. So I had my bachelor party this year, and everyone who went won or were given small $15 to $20 board games, and I had a few left over that no one chose, and Guillotine was one of those. And it's a very good filler game. So what I mean by filler game is that it doesn't take too much brain power. It plays in 20 minutes or less, and it's just goofy fun. Great game to play when you just got done with like a long game or just about to play a long, complicated game. In Guillotine, you are trying to chop off the most valuable heads in the French Revolution, and you are playing cards to manipulate the line of people that you could potentially chop off their head, and it's just goofy, silly fun. Number 91 is Monikers. Monikers is charades with 3 rounds, basically. So you go up once, and you draw as many cards as you can, and you can use any amount of words and any amount of actions that you want, and then from there, the subsequent rounds are limited. Some you can only say 1 word plus actions, and another round you can only use actions, and there's optional rounds that make it crazier and crazier. I've only played this once. I haven't had a particularly good play of this, I don't think, yet. I could see this one rising, but it's a good time. Number 90 is Battleship. Classic Battleship. When I had an internship in Colorado, I had a bunch of coworkers who would go to the pub after work on Wednesdays, and they would play Battleship on their phone. And we all used one guy's phone, and we would just pass it around, and we would sit and talk for hours and just play Battleship. And when I was a kid, this was one of my favorite games, so I have a lot of good memories with Battleship. Number 89 is Concept, which is a game that I played a couple times in college and haven't played since. But basically in this game, the person whose turn it is knows what object on this board they're looking at, and then they are using colored blocks to try to describe to people what they're looking at. So if it's a snowman, for example, which I don't actually know if that's on this card, but let's say it's a snowman, you might put 3 white blocks and then a black block to represent a snowman with a top hat or something like that. Fun game. Number 88 is Hues and Cues. I've seen a lot of things on TikTok or whatever about this game. It's a pretty fun one. Basically, whoever's turn it is looking at the board, and they know what square on the spectrum of colors they're looking at, and they have to come up with a 1-word hint to tell people what color it is. So my favorite memory probably from this game is that it was this light green color, and the person whose job it was to give a hint said Shaggy, like from Scooby-Doo. And most people were putting it in green, and some people started thinking, like, what if he's talking about khakis, though? He does famously wear khakis. And so you get into things like that. It's goofy fun. Number 87 is another small box card game called The Mind. In The Mind, you are trying to get through as many levels as you can with your team without talking and without dying. And the way that you do that is that you play cards from the lowest to the highest value. And so in the first round, everyone has 1 card. Maybe I have 33, someone else has 60. I have to play mine before them without talking. So this is a good time to bring up something that I think about a lot with board games, especially board game design, which is where your eyes are when you're playing games. There are a lot of games, and a lot of games that I love, where your eyes are down here the entire time. Your eyes are just specifically on what you are doing. You are building up this thing. Those games tend to be very puzzly, often can play very well solo. Other games, your eyes are kind of out here on the table. You're looking at what you're doing. You're looking what's on the collective board. Often it's really important what other players are doing. It heavily affects your turn, or you can block people on the map or whatever. And then other games, your eyes are here, straight ahead, looking at the people that you're playing with. And The Mind is great for that. This game, I wish that I had it at summer camp as a kid. It feels very much like a camp game. I did beat The Mind this year with a friend, which was really fun. Now that I beat it, I kind of want to lend it out. It's kind of an experience game. The first time you play it and beat it especially is probably the most fun that you're going to have with it, in my opinion. Number 86 is another small box card game called Wizard. And Wizard is a trick-taking game, which means that you are playing cards and there's going to be a trump suit. In this case, it's determined by the deck. You just flip over a card from the deck. And then whoever has the highest card wins, unless someone played the trump suit, and whoever played the trump suit wins. And in this game, there's an ultimate trump suit called Wizards. And if you play the Wizard, that's like the goated card. You're definitely going to win. I like it a lot. You have to bet how many tricks you think you're going to win, and that can include 0, which is cool. You could win the entire game by betting 0 and never winning a trick. I used to hate trick-taking games because my in-law family is so good at them, and comparatively, I was so trash at them. But now I've played so much with them that it's actually one of my favorite categories of games. It's kind of this whole language of game style that once you've played 1 or 2, you can get into the category and it gets a lot better. Number 85 is Catan. Catan is a great game primarily because a lot of people know how to play it and you don't have to teach the rules, and a lot of people have really good memories with it, and a lot of people really love it. And I love playing games that other people love. Catan is not necessarily my style of game because I don't love the resource trading that goes on in it. I don't love the dice roll mechanic, but I cannot deny that I've had many, many great games of Catan in my life. Number 84 is Gloom. Gloom is another small box card game that I played with my sister and brother-in-law at a pub, and it was honestly like the perfect pub game. It has a silly theme, which is that you are trying to make your family die before any other family. So everyone has 5 people in their family, I believe, and you first are trying to make them as sad as possible, and then you are trying to kill them. And once one person, their entire family dies, the game is over, and then whoever had the saddest family throughout their lives wins. And the neat mechanic with this game is that the cards are clear, and so you place these modifying cards on top of your family cards, and they can cover up other modifiers, as you can kind of see on those cards on the right. Really fun and neat. You're encouraged to come up with stories about how these terrible things happened to your characters, how they died, how this happened, how that happened. It's the perfect little pub game, I would say. Patchwork is what I would call the perfect board game cafe game. It's a nice one to go in and be familiar with and be able to take off the shelf and have as a filler game. I don't like it enough to own it, but I do enjoy it quite a bit. Basically, you're trying to build the best quilt out of this selection of Tetris-shaped pieces that are in a circle, and you can only choose pieces that are like 3 from the most recently chosen piece, and it creates this whole mental thing where you're watching the opponent and you're watching yourself a lot, and you're trying to just fill out your grid. Very fun and satisfying. I did play the Halloween version of this, and that one, instead of these cute little buttons, used eyeballs, and I was like, why did they choose eyeballs for this? I wish it was pumpkins or something, but I thought that was kind of funny. Number 82 is a game called Rummikub. I just learned how to play this in November this year, I believe. And what you're doing in this game is you have this collection of numbers, and then in the center are numbers that people have played on the table that have to be sets of the same color or a run of numbers, for example. And when it gets to you, you're trying to modify these runs while keeping them all in at least collections of 3, while getting rid of your tiles as fast as you can. And it's a fun game. It's mostly about seeing the possibilities on the board more than anything. As long as on your turn, you look at what you can do and you do as much as you can do, then you'll be fine. Number 81 is a game called Ravine. I just played this not too long ago with a group of friends, and it was the first time I played a board game with them, I believe. And it's a survival game that is somewhat cooperative and somewhat competitive because the goal of the game is to survive. So if you survive, you win. Doesn't matter how many other people survive. But the more you cooperate with people, the better off you're probably going to be. My favorite mechanic in this game is that you have these heart tokens, and you have to flip them over and intentionally take damage in order to go out into the woods and find materials. And these materials on their own can be useless, but if you trade them with other people and you trust the people around you, they can be really helpful. We had a fun time with this one. Number 80 is Tapple, a game that is probably self-explanatory almost just by looking at the box, but you have this device in front of you with all these letters, and then there's a category, and there's a timer built into this device, and you have to click a letter and say something within the category. If it's movies, you can press S and say Star Wars. Then it goes to the next person, and it's an elimination game. Once you can't think of something, you're out. Really, really fun, easy to play game. Number 79 is Encore, one of a few roll and write games published by Stronghold Games. In this game, you're rolling dice, and then you are filling in your sheet that you have with a bunch of colors that are in different shapes and regions that are shaped kind of like Tetris pieces. And you have to fill in the number that you rolled and the color that you rolled. So 4 blues, for example, connecting other X's that you've already had. This is another fun little pub game. Number 78 is Steam Up, a Feast of Dim Sum. This is a game that my sister brought to Thanksgiving, where you are one of the zodiac animals, I believe, and you are trying to have the best feast of dim sum out of all of the animals there. And you are doing this by drafting bamboo steam sections, I believe, and taking these amazing little pieces that are kind of like little rubbery, squishy pieces. That's probably like my favorite part of this game, honestly, is that these pieces are so like fun and addicting to hold. But it's a great little drafting game. You're trying to get your animals specific requirements, what they want the most in order to score the most points. I really want to play this one again because when I played it, it ended sooner than I kind of realized that it would. So I could see this one moving up. I had a fun time with this. Now's a good time to explain. You may have already noticed that all of the games here either say new or they have a red negative number. That's the only thing that you've seen so far. Or when we get further onto the list, they have a green positive number. That's where they've moved relative to last year on this list. So far, you've only seen negative because, again, last year I only had 62 or 63 games, so it's only possible for games to have moved down at this point in the list. And also, I wouldn't hold too much weight when it comes to how far they've moved down in this list because I have added more than double the amount of games that I did last year. So if a game has moved from, let's say, 30 to 45, that's really not a change in how much I like the game as much as it is more games coming in and taking those spots ahead of it that I just happen to like more. Number 77 is a game called Mint Privateers, which I just played not too long ago with my friend and co-designer that I mentioned earlier, Chan. He got this game. It fits in a little mint tin, and yet it is an open world sandbox pirate adventure game where you're trying to score the amount of points required to win, and you can play solo or you can play 2-player. And I was pretty amazed at how much game was in this little tin. And when I went to rate the game on Board Game Geek, popular board game website, I was the first one to rate this game. It is not getting the attention that it deserves, in my opinion. Very impressed with what they did here. Number 76 is Call to Adventure: The Stormlight Archive. This is a game based off of the Brandon Sanderson novels, and Brandon Sanderson is my favorite author, so I went ahead and got this game before I was truly into the hobby, to be honest. I got this game, and I need to play it more, because as I was making this list, I couldn't really remember how the flow of the game went, but essentially, you have a character that has a background, a motivation, and a goal. So maybe they are a thief who just wants to be free, and they want to be a Knights Radiant. Maybe they want to be a Windrunner or an Edge Dancer, if you know the novels. You can play this game solo, you can play it cooperatively, or you can play it competitively. I've played it mostly cooperatively, where you try to beat Odium at the end of the game. As you're going through the game, you are doing these skill checks. You're trying to accomplish these certain story missions. You're adding on to your character's story. It's very thematic. And you're rolling these runes that you can see on the left there. And so I've never played a game like this where you're not rolling dice. You're just rolling two-sided runes. But they're very satisfying and interesting. And I need to give this game more of a chance. Number 75 is Pocketbook Adventures. This game is constantly right on my desk. And it is sweet for what it is. All it is this book. And I really wish that I had this game in high school because I know that I would have loved to play it in study hall. But basically, you are taking a pencil and there are these little targets on the game. And you are closing your eyes and trying to hit the target. And based on how well you hit it, that determines how well you do in combat and exploration and opening chests and stuff in this game. And it's kind of a spatial puzzle as well as this dexterity minigame. And the best part about it is that you can open the book, do 1 or 2 turns, and then completely walk away. So I actually use this game a lot as motivation when I'm trying to get stuff done or do chores. I'll do chores for 15 minutes, come back to the book, do like 2 turns in like 30 seconds, go do another few. And as I'm doing chores, I'm thinking like, all right, what's my next move? Fantastic game. Number 74 is Throw Burrito, made by the same people as Exploding Kittens, I believe. And this game is great because you get to throw burritos at your friends. You're trying to score points by having the most sets of cards, and you're rapidly going through your hand, trading a card to the next player, pulling a card, seeing if it matches your set, giving it to the next player. But sometimes you get these burrito cards, which will make people duel. So some of them are burrito fights, I think they're called. And if someone gets a set of these, they yell like burrito fight. And then the 2 players next to them, to their right and left, have to pick up these squishy burritos that are kind of like stress balls and throw them at each other, and whoever gets hit gets a negative point at the end of the game. Obviously can't play this game if there's breakable stuff in the room, but it's a silly one. Number 73 is Scrabble. Scrabble is kind of in the same category of Boggle. I'm not good at it, but I greatly enjoy it. You have a set of letters in front of you and you're trying to come up with words, and you can combine them with letters that are already on the table, and there's bonuses on the table. I have a friend in Colorado whose family has this game, like a giant version on their wall, and that is now my preferred way to play it. I don't know if I'll ever get to play it that way again, but that was awesome. Number 72 is Takenoko, a game that you are trying to manage a bamboo farm as well as this little panda. I think the theme is that the Chinese government gifted your farm this panda, and now you have to feed it, so it's kind of like a burden, but you also score points by feeding the panda. You're trying to build the best garden and have the specific bamboo that you want and make this dang panda happy. I need to give it another try. This is one that my wife Caroline and I played at the Board Game Cafe once. Need to play it again. Number 71 is Blockus, a classic game that I have a couple of friends who are insane at. In Blockus, you are placing blocks on this grid, and you have to place your next block diagonally adjacent, but not orthogonally adjacent to the one that you placed beforehand. And it's this area control game that you're trying to block off other players and pull off these sneaky moves. And against the friends that own this game, I don't think I've ever played, but I will still play with them whenever they want to because it's a good one. Risk is number 70, and Risk, more than any other game, deserves an honorary gold medal for being my favorite game of all time for the longest period of time in my life. I would say from age 10 to 18, if you would have asked me what my favorite board game was, I probably would have said Risk. And now it has moved so far down the fall from being up so high. But when I grew up in a non-board game household, I would say. We talked about this over last Thanksgiving, because nowadays when I get together with my family, I'll bring way too many games, like 10 games, a toxic amount of games, you could say. And my sister will bring 1 or 2 games, and that's what we do. But growing up, we were not a board game household. So I played this primarily with my friends. I had one babysitter that played this when I was really young, and it's fallen so far. Whoever controls the world wins. That's what Risk is. Number 69 is Magic the Gathering, another game like chess that doesn't deserve the disrespect of being so low on a list probably, but here it is. It's a collectible card game. It's the best collectible card game, but it is a lifestyle game that I am unfortunately not into the way that Magic players are. I have a friend who really likes this game, and if I can play with his deck, I'll play a game or two, but I don't have the desire to commit the money or the time that it takes to get into this game. Now you might say, why don't you give the digital implementation a chance? It doesn't take up the space, it doesn't take up the money, it's quicker and easier to get into. And this will be a little discussion about video games and board games. The reason that I play board games is to not be on a screen, I think. I've been thinking about this more this past year because growing up, as I said, wasn't in a board game family, but I played a ton of video games. And these days, I mostly just play the new Zelda games that come out, as well as a few new Nintendo games, but I'm not playing a lot of video games. In fact, I prefer to sit down, even if it's on my own, and just play a board game, just do the puzzle or the adventure or whatever it is that is a board game. And I'm not really sure why that is. I think I like the feeling of moving things around. I think I like having it all in front of me. And I really like that the entire game is in my head. There's no engine running the game. There's no back-end stuff. It's just rules that I know, and I'm keeping myself honest and playing this game. I really can't explain it, but that's why board game design fascinates me so much, is why am I so enamored by these plastic or wooden bits and these cards and all this. I would love to find out, and I would love to create games that other people love. Number 68 is Betrayal at House on the Hill. And this is a example of a game that I like, but I will mostly be criticizing when I talk about it because I want to like it so much more. As you can see, it fell 44 spots, which is probably the furthest that a game has fallen on this list. And it's because I've lost some patience with how the rules work in this game. Basically, the way the game works is that players are exploring a mansion together, and as they're exploring it, they're building onto this mansion, and they're getting items, and they're getting hurt, and going around, and everyone's on the same team. And then there's a betrayal, and typically one player will turn into a monster, or will betray them, or will invite a horde of zombies, or something bad happens. Every scenario is different. There's about 50 scenarios. This one person is now against everyone else, which in theory and in concept is really cool. I've had some fun games of this, but in reality, it means that you're sitting down and you're playing a game for 20 minutes, and then one person has to go off and read the rules, and everyone else reads their set of rules, the non-trader rules. It's kind of dependent on how good that other player is at reading rules, whether they're a board game person or not, and it's a lot of pressure on that person. And I've heard that the third edition fixes some of these issues, and I own this edition, the second edition here, which is a bummer because I don't like the game enough to buy the third edition and see if it really does fix those issues. I've had good memories with this game, but I've lost a little bit of patience with Betrayal at House on the Hill. Number 67 is Reykholt. This is a game based on the town in Iceland called Reykholt, where the big production there is vegetables and these geothermal greenhouses where they grow primarily tomatoes, but also carrots and cabbages and other things. This game holds a special place in my heart because it is my honeymoon game, you could call it. Pictured there is my wife Caroline in the greenhouse that this game was based off of in Reykholt, Iceland. We played this game on our honeymoon specifically because we were going to Reykholt, and we stopped at Reykholt specifically because of this game. And Unfortunately, it's not Uwe Rosenberg's best game. I still enjoy it, but it doesn't fit a niche. I'm actually more likely to play Betrayal at House on the Hill than I am Reykholt, because Betrayal at House on the Hill is unlike anything you've ever played. Reykholt, you're trying to sell the most vegetables and it's worker placement, and it doesn't do anything crazy that another game can't do that I would prefer. Number 66 is Mysterium. In this game, one player is giving hints on where a murder happened, I believe, and the other players, using these abstract pictures that have been given them by the hint master, are trying to figure out where and when it happened. I need to give this game another chance. We barely squeezed it in with a good friend who likes it a lot, and I didn't do very well. He was the ghost or the clue giver. I was not picking up what he was throwing down. Had a good time, though. Number 65 is Exit, which is a series of games that you can only play through once. So some might argue that this isn't a true board game because it's kind of more of just a little experience. But you could also argue that it's a legacy game. There are other board games like this where you kind of destroy components as you play, but you only get to play once. I believe it's $12 or $15 or so to be able to play and go through and figure out the riddles. And we played this one pictured here, Dead Man on the Orient Express, and we had a great time with it, other than a couple riddles that we could not figure out for the life of us. I believe that my family also played through a game of this, and they had the same experience, but I would definitely give another one a try. Number 64 is Spinner Dominoes, which is a spin on the game Dominoes. In this one, you're placing out your dominoes in your hand. If you don't have one, you're drawing one. You want to run out of dominoes before anyone else, and then your remaining dominoes are scored. Play over 10 rounds. Very casual, super fun game to play with the family over Thanksgiving or something like that. Number 63 is Priorities, which is a game that I was not interested in at all until it was gifted to me. Priorities is kind of the ultimate icebreaker game. Basically, someone is given 5 cards that are completely random and unrelated. You might be given something like cookies, brushing your teeth, powered wheelchairs, a $5 coffee, just the most random things, and then you have to rate what your favorites are amongst these things, and then the other players have to guess how you rated it. And cards that players guessed right, you win, and you're trying to spell out priorities, so on the other side of the card is going to be a letter in priorities, and you're trying to do that before the game does it. Very fun to get to know people. A lot of this kind of game, looking around and talking at people. It's a good one. Number 62 is a game called Intrepid that I backed on Kickstarter back when I was first getting into the hobby, and I was kind of disappointed at first. Basically, the game is this dice manipulation game where you are trying to survive a disaster on the International Space Station, and you have to manage your oxygen levels and your nutrition levels, and you're doing this by upgrading your modules on the ship and filling their dice requirements by placing these dice, using special abilities to manipulate dice. And I was a little disappointed the first time I played it, but I played it again recently, and there's a little more to it, and I can see why the game is fun and good, and I want to go through all the scenarios now and kind of develop my full opinion on it. I think the reason that I don't love this game is because it feels like the dice manipulation is a little too easy, but when you do it wrong, you are severely punished. Basically, I'll be trying to hit, 6, 7, 8 modules, and I know that I have the exact number of dice that I need to hit 8 modules. And if I hit 8 modules, I'll survive. And if I hit 7, I won't survive. And most of the time, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to hit 8 modules because there are so many ways to manipulate your dice. But then if you don't do it, you are not only punished then, but then you can't upgrade your modules, so you're punished subsequently every round because of that one mistake that you made. I want to play this one more though. Number 61 is The Chameleon, which is a hidden role game where one player plays as the chameleon and they cannot see what the specific word is. Everyone else can see what the word is in one of these cards that you can see here. So for instance, the category might be movies and the movie is Toy Story. Now, the chameleon doesn't know that. Everyone else does. And then you go around in a circle, and everyone gives a hint that isn't too obvious on what Toy Story is. And everyone then kind of has to like suss you out, like, all right, did he give that hint because he didn't want to be too obvious, because he didn't want the chameleon to find out? Or is he the chameleon? Now, the reason you don't want to be too obvious is because even if the chameleon is found out, but then can guess what the word is, the chameleon still wins. And I think the reason I like this, despite not liking hidden role games, it is definitely not my category. I think the reason that I like this is, one, it is very quick and silly, and two, the chameleon usually wins. So it's definitely pressure still when you're the chameleon, but you can throw out a stupid hint, like for Toy Story, you might say boy, just hoping that it's a movie that involves a boy, and then you can defend yourself by being like, oh, I just didn't want people to find me out. Chances are, if you are found out, you might even know that it's Toy Story. Great game. That's coming from a guy who doesn't like hidden role games, so hopefully that holds some weight. Number 60 is Wild Tales, which is an entire campaign game that is fit into only 18 cards. I'm playing through this game with my friend Chan. We are 6 levels in out of 9. Every session that we've met up to play, we have gotten into it and kind of been like, okay, this game's all right. It's sort of just like a series of skill checks, And then by the end of the level, it comes like so close to losing, and we barely pull through, and we like high five and cheer, and we have to admit to ourselves like, all right, this game's actually pretty good, And I've been thinking about why that is, and I think it's because you have your own character that you're upgrading and your own ship that you're upgrading, which that in and of itself is really fun. And then as you're playing the game, you are trying to manipulate the size of the deck of cards, because you can lose by going through the set of cards too quickly. But you need those cards in order to be able to upgrade your character, get certain items. And so you're trying to time it so that you can get stuff and then spend it before the deck is reshuffled. And I think that's the aspect that I really like. Now, I don't think this is the most popular board game, so I don't know how many people know what I'm talking about. But if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. All right, number 59 is Everdell. Everdell has great table presence. It has this tree so that when people come and walk by your table and see you playing it, they're like, oh my gosh, what is that game? Well, that game is Everdell. It's a worker placement game about cute animal forest creatures, and each player is trying to create their town of forest creatures by getting these cards and stuff. And it's a good game. It's my number 59 game. Caroline really liked it a lot. But with that being said, this game is kind of like Reykholt in that it doesn't fill a niche for me. It's a good worker placement game. There are worker placement games that I would prefer to play. It's an easy worker placement game, but there are games that are a little smoother coming up on the list and a little faster, that if I was teaching someone a worker placement game for the first time, I would prefer to choose one of those. And it's a very cute worker placement game about forest critters. And there's a game that's worker placement with cute forest critters that I prefer over this one. So I feel a little bad that I don't like it more, but it just doesn't fill a niche. It doesn't do things for me that other games don't do better. Number 58 is Yahtzee. Yahtzee is a game where you roll dice and then you try to get the most points on the score based on the results. My dad loves this game, which is part of the reason that I love this game, because he will not play most board games with me, but he will sit and play this one with me for hours. So pretty much just riding off that, I love Yahtzee. Great game. Number 57 is Near and Far. This is a game that I played in college because one of my college roommates owned it. So here's where I should bring up, I didn't grow up in a board game family. And then I went to college and I roomed with 2 different people who were independently very into board games and had a ton of board games under their bed. And I played board games with them in college, but I still didn't get into the hobby despite that for some reason. But this is a game that one of them owned, and we did play through a bunch. Anyway, Near and Far is a game by Ryan Lockett where you are exploring through this map in kind of this deserty land, kind of I remember a lot of grass plains and stuff. And as you explore, you go through this book and certain things happen and you need to camp and you need to explore. And at the time, what I didn't vibe with this game is that half of the game felt like it was competitive and half of it felt like it was cooperative storytelling. And I couldn't decide if I wanted to win the game or if I wanted to like just have fun and experience more of the story. And Ryan Laukat has since come out with games that are completely cooperative. And I think that if this game had been completely cooperative, I would have liked it more. But I would love to give this one another chance. I think I also played Above and Below by Ryan Laukat, but I didn't rank it because I looked at pictures on Board Game Geek and I was like, all right, I hardly remember Near and Far. I really don't remember this game, so that's why that one doesn't appear on this list. Number 56 is the Catan dice game, which is the Yahtzee, except for instead of playing with my dad, I play it a lot with my brother, and I like it for similar reasons. It's a fun game that we'll just sit and play for hours, honestly. If you play Catan, it has the same resources, except that you're rolling them, and you get to re-roll them up to 3 times, Yahtzee style, and then you have to build roads, knights, cities, settlements, just like in Catan. If you like Catan, you're not necessarily going to like this game. You have a better chance to like it if you like games like Yahtzee. Number 55 is Decorum. Decorum is a game where you are passive-aggressive roommates who want the house that you live in to look a specific way, but you won't exactly tell each other what it is that you're so upset about. Now, this is one of 3 games on my list that I played at the board game convention with a couple friends last year, all of which turned out to be great games. This one is rated lowest, not because I didn't like it. This game is awesome. If you ever get a chance to play this, you have to give it a try. So basically, everyone has specific requirements for what they want the house to look like. For instance, I want all of the walls to be painted either red or yellow, or I want this room to only have 2 different colors in it. And on your turn, you are manipulating the house, probably to help your own requirement, but also to get a feeling on what the other people's requirements are. And then when someone manipulates the house, it is your job to react appropriately. So these reactions, and it's kind of group dependent based on how much your group gets into it, but these reactions for us kind of range from anything like, you are a godsend, this is the best thing that I've ever seen you do, you are the best roommate ever, to not cool, dude. Not cool. Like, we gave each other the silent treatment during this game. We got pretty into it. It was fun. Number 54 is a game called Pandemic. Pandemic is a game where you're trying to save the world from these virus outbreaks. There's 4 distinct viruses. You move around curing these viruses and trying to find the specific cure that will eliminate the virus permanently. It's this optimization game where you're trying not to have the world die before you can save it. It's a classic. I think that I've played it to the point that I don't gravitate to it as much, but it's one of those games that if someone has never played it, I will instantly lend them my copy and say, you have to find someone to play this with you. You have to go through it. It does have the problem where it's a cooperative game that all the information is just open, and so it results in what is called quarterbacking, which is where one player kind of tells everyone what to do, and everyone just kind of argues about what's the best move because everyone can see all the cards that everyone else has. That's the biggest issue with this game. I've since played games that have solved that issue, and I would prefer over Pandemic. Still a great game. Heroes of Barcadia is a completely different game where you are exploring this dungeon, fighting monsters, rolling dice to do so, and your character is a pint cup, and the amount of liquid in it is your health. So when you take damage, you drink. It's a drinking game. It is the dorkiest way to drink, but it is really fun. Now, my number one complaint with this game is that it's honestly too simple. I can see why they wanted to make it simple because it's supposed to be a light, fun group game where you are drinking, but it is really too simple. I wish there was like a little something for me to strategize, But if you just go into it knowing that it's not going to be that, and you just like fireball your friend and make him drink 10 health, it's a fun one for that. 60 Second City is another amazing board game cafe game. A little filler that our board game cafe owns, and Caroline and I will play that, sometimes when we go. And this game, you have 60 seconds to build the best city. And what you're doing is there's all these tiles upside down, and at the same time you have to pick one up, place it down, pick one up, place it down, pick one up, place it down, trying to fill these requirements. It's very chaotic, and we really love it. I don't think I've really heard about anyone talk about this game before. I don't think it's too popular, but it's really fun. Number 51 is a game called Lost Heir. This game barely didn't make the top 50, but this is the game that is what Yahtzee is to my dad and Catan Dice is with my brother. This is with my in-laws, and specifically my mother-in-law. This is the game that they will all play and will always be down to play, and that's why I love it. It's a very simple trick-taking game, rules-wise. There's a surprising amount of nuance in it, and this is the game that taught me trick-taking, and as I was learning it, they'd be like, "Why did you play that card? What were you thinking?" And it took me like 2 years of going to family Christmases and events to finally understand what they were talking about. Many great memories with Lost Heir, another small box card game based on towns in Canada. Very obscure theme. Other than Mint Privateers, this is the game that I've rated on Board Game Geek that had the least amount of ratings. All the cards that you're ever going to see look like this because the game has been out of print for like years and years, I think. That's Lost Heir. All right, now we're in top 50, the cream of the crop here. So we're going to start off with Sushi Go. It's moved down 18 places, and it is combined with the original, as well as Party, as well as Sushi Roll. And these games are all drafting games. So you have either dice and Sushi Roll, or in the other games you have cards. You're choosing one, giving the cards to everyone else, and then getting past another hand of cards, choosing one, continuing to do so. And you are doing this in order to have the best plate of sushi. So certain sushi wants to be paired in doubles or triples and gives you a certain amount of points, or you have to collect a specific set of sushi. Great teaching game, great intro to board game kind of game, great filler game. This game, I imagine in the future I will be playing. If I have kids one day, I'll be playing on camping trips. I'll play a number of games with them because it's super fun and easy to learn. Clue is the first game that we've seen that's moved up, I think, and it is my highest rated classic game, which if younger me saw me rate Clue higher than Risk, he would probably be so mad, because Clue was like my sister's game and Risk was like my kind of game. But now in my adult life, I have many friends who really like Clue and are always down to play it, and I've found the fun in it for sure. You go around, try to figure out who done it. You have a certain amount of cards that you can see that they didn't kill the guy with this weapon or whatever, and then you have to ask players to see their cards as you're moving around this map. Very fun game. King Domino, which is combined with Queen Domino, although I do prefer the smaller game King Domino, is a game that you are taking these domino tiles, placing it on your grid. You cannot exceed a 5x5 grid with these dominoes, and then you score a certain number of points. King Domino is probably the best filler game that I own that isn't just kind of silly fun. It's more mathematical. It's not like Guillotine and these other games where it's more about just throwing cards, having fun, playing it, just to play it. Parks, which I've combined with Trails in this game, although I prefer Parks, you are going on a hike and trying to have the best experience possible by visiting national monuments and taking pictures and getting good experiences. It's pretty classic worker placement, get resources, turn stuff in, with the big twist being that you have to move your worker, your character, along this specific path. You go down the path and then back, and different things change when it changes from day to nighttime. So you're trying to time when you're getting stuff and trying to predict when other players are going to fill up your spots and take what you want. That's Parks. Just One is the simplest, board game that I own, and maybe the simplest board game that I've ever played. You have a card, and you say a number, 1 through 5, and then that's your hint. You don't know what this hint is. Everyone else has these whiteboards, and they give a one-word hint for what it is. So in this example up there, it's chocolate. The players then reveal to each other their hints before they reveal to whoever's turn it is. And if 2 players have the same hint, then that hint is gone and cannot be used. So in this example that you can see up here, say that 2 players use milk and 2 players use dark. So those words are eliminated, and then whoever's turn it is only left with Belgian hazelnuts. Well, they might not get chocolate out of that. Maybe they will. So this game has a lot of game and a little amount of rules, and that's what I appreciate it. Super fun family and just teaching people really quick. Seven Wonders Duel, many people call this the ultimate 2-player game because you are trying to build the best city and you are trying to outdo your opponent by either having the best military, scoring the most points by building the most stuff, or having the best technology. And there's this military track, and every time you advance your military, you move it to your opponent, and if you get it to the other side, they instantly lose. And there's technology, and if you collect all the different types of technology, the other person instantly loses. Otherwise, you play through the whole game, and whoever has the most points wins. This game is awesome because it feels like a game that your eyes should be on your own stuff, but in reality, you are spending more of your time looking at your opponent, thinking, oh, geez, I have to completely redo my strategy because I wanted to go the technology route, but now they're pushing military, so now I have to counter military. And then while you're doing that, they have the opportunity to maybe get more points than you, steal the technology thing that you needed. There's a lot of strategy in this little game, and I would love to play it more in 2024. Star Realms is awesome because it is a deck building game that fits in your pocket. It is this tiny box that packs so much punch, great for travel. Players start with 10 cards that are all pretty bad, and then there's a market of 5 cards. On your turn, you hit the other opponent for damage, blast them, it's space themed, and then you buy something from the market, and then you shuffle through your deck, and now you have better cards, rinse and repeat. The game has these 4 colors, red, blue, green, and yellow, and the more you have of a color, the better that color gets. So you are trying to pick early on in the game, okay, maybe I want to go really hard into a couple of these colors, red or green or whatever, and then the other player is paying attention to what colors you're getting a lot of so they can kind of deny those cards and buy them out of the market or whatever it is. This game has surprised me. The more I played it, the more I realized that there's a good amount to it for how quick it is to teach. You can teach this game to someone in about a minute, which is great. Number 43 is Dune Imperium, which is a deck building game as well as a worker placement game. In this game, the cards that you have are going to determine what spaces on the map you can use. So you're building your deck not only to have good cards, but also to be able to determine what actions you can even do in this game. Now, I only played this game once, and my biggest complaint with it at the time was that there wasn't as much opportunity to grow my deck into what I wanted it to be, I guess. But that was after one play. I think now, going back, knowing the time restriction that I'm on, I would have a better time with this. I really want to try this again. Number 42 is Splendor. I got introduced to this game this year. A very simple game where you are buying these cards in these 3 sets, tier 1, 2, and 3, as well as trying to win the favor of the nobles up top. And when you buy cards, they give you a permanent gem that helps you buy more cards. So on your turn, you're either buying one of these cards or you're picking up gems. Very simple, very strategic, very cutthroat game. Number 41 is a game called Codenames that I played a ton in college, where players are split into 2 teams, and each team has a clue giver that is trying to connect the words that are their teams on this board as efficiently as possible. So they might connect airplane and bat with wing, for example, but it's even better if they can connect 3 or 4 words, because whoever gets all their words correct first wins. And there's also a death card that they're trying to avoid. This game is awesome with groups, getting to know people, as long as people don't mind being in the hot seat and trying to come up with these clever hints. Some people I've found don't like that about this game, but other than that, this one's a winner. Number 40 is Telestrations, a game that I have found more appreciation for the more I go into board games, I think. It only moved down 2 this year, which in a way kind of means that it really moved up because of all the new games that are on this list. In this game, players are playing telephone but with pictures. So you get a word, maybe it's dog, and you write dog, give it to the next player. That player draws a beautiful picture of a dog, passes it on to the next person. That person's like, what am I looking at? And so then they have to guess, is this a giraffe? And then they pass that to the next player. And the best part about this game is when you can get a group of, 8 or more people playing it, and it goes all the way around. And then you, as the person with the book, will present, all right, guys, the word was dog. What am I looking at right now? And it's so fun to play, even in a group where you have some really good artists, which a lot of my friends are really good artists, and then you mix that in with people who are really bad artists, aka me. That somehow makes the game even funnier. It's fun to play with a timer so that you only have 30 seconds or a minute to draw as well. It makes the drawings have even more chaotic energy. I think this game doesn't get enough hype, really. I know it's a popular one, but amongst board game people, I don't think this one gets enough attention. Telestrations is awesome. Number 39 is Skull, a game that fits so much fun into very few rules. Every player is given these 4 coasters that have either pictures of skulls or flowers on them. You have 3 flowers and 1 skull. On your turn, you place one of your coasters, and then when it comes back to you, you can either place another coaster or you can start bidding. And what you're bidding on is how many coasters around the table you think you can flip up without revealing a skull. And if you correctly do that, you get a point. And if you flip a skull, you lose a life, which is one of your coasters. And the player who gets 2 points first wins. That's all it is, 2 points. And this game, I think, is more fun, honestly, the more you play with people, because you start to get in each other's heads like, okay, I know your play style, and you know mine, so now I have to change this up. And as you can see here, these are my cards, and they are completely worn down, because we've probably played over 100 games of Skull. Awesome game. Number 38 is Ticket to Ride, which I've also played the New York and London version, although I think that the big version is the way to go when it comes to Ticket to Ride. In this game, players are trying to get from point to point on a map. This is the American map that you see here, the big one that I've played, by drawing cards that have colors on them, and then when you finally get a set that's enough cards, you can play, for example, 3 blue cards to do a 3-length blue route. And then you have these hidden objectives of where you're trying to go from place to place on the map. And when you get those done, you can score those points at the end of the game. Players are trying to block off each other from certain routes, and you're trying to plan ahead. Modern classic for a reason. Azul. This is the only version of Azul that I've played so far. Stained Glass of Sintra. I think it's a great game. Players are drafting tiles in order to make the best stained glass window, which is a very abstract theme, because really you're trying to complete these sets as efficiently as possible. Stained Glass of Sintra has this interesting mechanic where when you score something in a column, after that, anytime you score a column to the left of it, you get the points for that column as well as the points for all the ones on the right. So you want to score the columns on the right side of your board first so that later the ones on the left side of your column are more valuable. This game was one of the first games that I had in my collection, and I think it would have slipped further than the 37 spot, but I played a game recently where I looked at it and thought, this has so much going on, and I really enjoy it. Number 36 is Lords of Waterdeep. Now, this is the game, when I was talking about Everdell, that I would say, if I could ideally teach someone worker placement, I would choose this game to do it. So, I know I've used the word a lot, but if you don't know what worker placement is, it's where you have a worker, typically you have a handful of workers in a worker placement game, And when you place it on the board, that dictates what action you get to do. The board will have a certain number of options that you can do. And when you place a worker there, sometimes in many worker placement games, another player can not take that same action, or you cannot take that same action twice. Lords of Waterdeep is themed off of Dungeons and Dragons, and of all the worker placement games that I've played, it is the simplest. You are placing workers typically to get resources, or you are fulfilling contracts in order to get points. That being said, this game is still awesome. I would still play it whenever anyone wants to give it a try. Number 35 is the dexterity game Crokinole. This game is very popular in Canada, and I think that's why I've gotten a chance to play it, because I have Canadian in-laws. In this game, you are flicking these round pegs to get as close to the center of this board as possible. But if someone else already has one of their pieces on the board, you have to hit their piece. The board is like smooth as glass. The best boards are kind of like a shuffleboard table where things just glide across the table. The only downside of Crokinole is that after a while, your fingernails can honestly hurt from flicking these little discs so often. But if I ever see a Crokinole table, I'm always down to play a game. I really want to play on higher quality boards than I've played on in the past. I hope one day to own my own nice board, but that's Crokinole. Number 34 is a game that has moved up 8 spots, which is the highest that we've seen a game climb this year. And it's my number 34, so it's in the top quarter of games that I've played. And yet, the things that I have to say about it are going to be mostly negative, unfortunately. And that's because this, like Magic the Gathering, is meant to be a lifestyle game where you invest a lot of time and money into the game. And currently I'm playing through a campaign with a couple friends, and we are having a great time. But in my opinion, not a good enough time to continue after the campaign that we are currently on. So what Arkham Horror is it's a deck building game where you're modifying your deck and building it in between scenarios, and then during a scenario you play with those as your cards. You're going through this Lovecraftian world and this Lovecraftian level that you're on, and you are doing a series of skill checks in order to fight monsters and get clues and go through the story. And the story part of it's really fun, the deck building part of it's really fun, but I am not the biggest fan of the series of skill checks. I wish that it was a little more than just drawing stuff out of a bag. And this game is so many people's favorite game, so it's a bummer that I don't like it more. And I will say that the more we've played it, the more I have liked it. So there's a chance that by the time we end this campaign, I'll be ready for another one at some point. But I'm not totally convinced. I've played other campaign games that I personally prefer more. I'm having a great time with it. I just don't want to invest more money in it. Number 33 is another roll and write game by Stronghold Games. Roll and write is the genre started by Yahtzee, or at least popularized by Yahtzee. This game is like Yahtzee on steroids. I honestly should try to get my dad to learn how to play this game because it is so fun once you get into it. Basically, you have these 5 colored dice plus a white die that is a wild card, and you roll them and you fill the boxes in their category, and it is full of combos. So as you're filling this box, that might give you a bonus that you can use here, and you can use here, and you can use here. And you play the game over 4 to 6 rounds, depending on the number of players. And by the time you get to round 5, you're thinking, okay, how am I going to make this happen? And then you pull off the craziest combo, and you get this super high score. And then if you're playing with my friend Chan, you're like, look how awesome I did. And then he's like, oh, I got like 100 points more than that. It's like, come on, Chan. Great game, great game. Number 32 is a game called Chinatown, and this game I did not think that I would like. What it is there's this board that has numbers 1 through 90 or so, and you get control of certain areas on the board, and this represents the land and the properties that you own in Chinatown. And then you control certain shops, and you also have money. And you can trade anything in this game. You can trade what you control on the board, you can trade what shops you have, you can trade what money you have. And you want to collect a bunch of shops of the same type and put them on the same area of the board so that it becomes one big shop, because every round that shop is going to produce a bunch of money, and it's all trading. This is all mechanics that just resolve around everyone trading like crazy. Like, no, I can make you a better deal than him. I can make you a better deal than that. And I did not like that type of game. I said that that's my least favorite part of Catan, for example, until I played Chinatown. For some reason, this game completely clicked, and I had the most chaotic game ever when I played this. I think that the winner won by like the lowest denomination of dollars, so it like came right down to the end. Super fun game. Not sure why I like it when I thought that I would dislike it, but I learned something about myself when I played Chinatown. Number 31 is a game called Obsession, where you are fighting to have the best estate and the highest prestige and the best guests in Victorian England. This is a surprisingly heavy worker placement game, which has a theme that I was really not into when I was learning the rules, but I learned it because my wife really wanted to play it, and I'm pretty much down to play anything, you know? It turned out to be awesome, and I got pretty into the theme when I was playing it. So you're building out your estate, you're trying to get these rooms that are better, and there's these two Fairchild kids that you're trying to impress more than anyone else in the game. And you're hiring these butlers. You know, I found myself into it enough that I'm taking these actions where I'm like, oh yes, I'm going to invite these prestigious guests to play 3 tennis matches in a row. It's more fun than I expected to have. It's great game design. It's unlike anything that I've played before, and I would play this game again in a heartbeat. Number 30 is Wingspan. I need to play more Wingspan. Wingspan is awesome. They're coming out with Wormspan, which is about dragons, which I guess is to reach a new target audience, but part of the charm of Wingspan for me is that it's about bird watching and it's about birds, and it's a theme that you wouldn't expect yourself to get into, but it ends up being such a cozy game that that's kind of like the charm of it, I guess, at least for me. My friends who own this game and taught it to me, they've actually kind of gotten into bird watching because they like Wingspan so much. In Wingspan, you are creating this tableau of birds and trying to get the most points by having specific birds in specific places and having a bunch of eggs, which help you pay for stuff. It's pretty abstract as far as the theme goes, but it is extremely relaxing. The art is amazing, and it teaches you about birds. Number 29 is Apiary, which is published by Stonemaier Games, the same company as Wingspan. This is a game designed by Connie Vogelman that's about spacefaring bees. When humans become extinct, the next species that comes up after humans turns out to be bees, and they take to space. And you place workers, which are bees, on this board in order to explore space or build out your hive or get honey. And the interesting mechanic with this game is that your workers upgrade every time you play them. There's levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and level 4 bees are able to do like really good actions, but then they have to go into hibernation, and you have to basically, purchase them back in order to get them. The other interesting part is that in order to get your workers back, you have to bump them off the map. So unlike most worker placement games, where when someone goes to an action, you can't then take that action. In this game, when you go to an action, if someone else goes to that action, you get your newly upgraded bee back, which is really fun and interesting and adds this level of helping your opponents, where most games you're trying to make your stuff good and tear down your opponents. This one, you're making your stuff good and you're kind of regretfully helping your opponents along the way. This game, I love the theme. I love the gameplay. I've heard mixed reviews about it, but from this guy, it's 2 thumbs up. Number 28 is No Thanks. We've played about 50 to 60 games of No Thanks. In this game, you have a deck of cards that are numbers 3 through 35. you are trying to score the lowest number of points possible. So card comes to you on your turn, and you can either take it or you can say no thanks by placing a schmeckle onto it, and you have 11 schmeckles in your hand at the beginning of the game. And you pass to the next player who's presented with the same option, except now when they take it, they get the schmeckle as well as the card. So you create these piles of schmeckles until someone takes the card, and then they, at the end of the game, are going to have that many points, and the schmeckles that they get are negative points. Schmeckles, as we call them, are not only passing power in this game, but they are also negative points at the end of the game. And what makes this game interesting is that cards in sequence, only the lowest card counts. So if you have 34, 35, and 33, only the 33 is going to count against you at the end of the game. So you end up staking your claim somewhere in the deck, somewhere in these numbers, where you're betting on these other cards coming up in later rounds in the game so that you can then tax all your friends sitting at the table, because you know that they don't want to take that card, and you know they're going to pay you in order to not have to take that card. And then you get all these schmeckles, and schmeckles are power. Number 27, Heat Pedal to the Metal, a racing game. I never expected to play a board game, racing game that I liked, but Heat is awesome. In Heat, you are going 2 laps around the map. There's US, there's France, there's a couple other maps, and you have this deck of cards that when you play them, that shows how far you move on the map. And then when you're taking turns, you can't go too fast around that turn. If you push your car too hard in this game, you add heat to your deck, which are basically like dud cards that you have to get rid of later. So you're able to burst ahead of your opponents by taking heat, and then later you have to deal with the consequences. The whole game revolves around timing, of knowing when to add heat to your deck, knowing when to slow down, knowing how to get around corners as efficiently as possible. My one complaint with this game is that if you are 2 turns behind whoever's in the lead, you are probably not going to win. Which it's a lighthearted and quick enough game that doesn't really matter. But if you kind of push your luck a little too much early in the game, you're just going to watch as you're just falling further and further behind. Other than that, Heat Pedal to the Metal, I'd play it anytime. If you've never played it, this is one that I would say you should. Kingdom Builder is a game by Donald X. Vaccarino, same person who made Dominion, which is sitting right there behind me. Kingdom Builder is a game where you are placing these buildings. You have about 20 of these buildings, I think, and on your turn you have to place 3 of them on the board based on a card that you draw at the beginning of your turn. So the card says you have to build them in the grasslands, you have to build them in the grasslands. Now, if you can place your buildings by buildings that you already have on the board, you have to do that. And most of the time, you are not going to want to do that. So that's what makes this game interesting, is it's less so about having a good turn and more so about not making your future turns really bad. So it's a lot of planning for the future. There's these special abilities that you can gain on the board that help you, get more mobile and get more access to better lands around the board. I need to play this game more often because I don't see it talked about enough, honestly. Number 25 is Shot and Totten, another small box card game, another one that was left over from my bachelor party, actually. And it turned out to be awesome. I'm glad that no one took it because now it's one of my favorite games. It's in my top 25. So in this game, you are playing as rival ancient Scottish, fantasy Scottish tribes that have this row of boulders dividing your tribes, and you're fighting over control of one of the boulders so that you can roll it to slightly expand your territory. Now, that's a theme. Very abstract. Really what it is there's these 9 areas in front of you where you are trying to win 3-card poker hands. So you have a certain number of cards in your hand, you draw a card, and you play one, and then whoever has either rolled 3 stones in a row is going to win the game, or whoever at the end of the game won the most stones, so 5 or more out of the 9. I was surprised to find myself liking this game because I typically don't like poker and poker hand type stuff or card counting, but for some reason this one was different. Maybe because it's so compact into this little game and the card counting and stuff isn't too bad. But for whatever reason, this has really surprised me this year. Galaxy Trucker is one of the goofiest, funniest games that I played this entire year. It was a game that my friends and I played at the board game convention this year, and it plays in two parts. The first part of the game, you are building a spaceship, and this is done in real time. So there's all these pieces of a spaceship turned upside down, and you have your mat, and then when the timer starts, you start flipping these up and then adding them to your spaceship. Flipping cards up, adding to your spaceship, flipping it up, adding it to your spaceship, or putting it back if you don't want that piece. Now, there are specific rules to building your spaceship, but the gist of it is that you want as much firepower as possible, as many cannons as possible, as much cargo as possible. You're building your ship, you're like, oh, I have this, I have my shields, I have my engines, and then the timer ends, and inevitably there's something that you probably are lacking on or completely forgot entirely to add to your ship. Like, oh, this is an amazing ship. I didn't add any batteries to my ship. This is useless. And if you accidentally built something illegally, those have to get removed. That's phase 1. Phase 2 of the game, you are then going to go around and try to be the best Galaxy Trucker by getting the most cargo and making the most money by the end of the game. Meanwhile, there are enemy ships and asteroids hitting you, and this beautiful ship that you're so proud of that you built at the beginning of the game just completely blows up. And this year at the board game convention, the exact moment that I fell in love with this game was my friend had built his ship, and it was easily the best of all 3 ships, and he had the most cargo, and he was completely winning. And then there was this one meteorite that found his Achilles heel and just blew up half of his ship, and he lost all of his money. And in most games that would feel terrible, but this game is just such silly fun that we all just saw that happen and our jaws just dropped and we just all started cracking up. This game, you have to give it a try. The Fox in the Forest, another small box card game, and this one's a trick-taking game. This one has 2 versions, which I was both gifted. There's the competitive version, and then there's the cooperative version, and both of them are strictly 2-player. Pretty standard trick-taking. You have a trump suit. You have whoever has the best card wins, except in these ones, half of the cards have special abilities. I think of the 2 versions, I prefer the duet version, because there's this map with all these gems that you're trying to pick up, and both players want a certain player to win to pick up the next gem that they're going for, but they have to win in a specific way. So the duet version I've found to be like really hard to win. There's 3 difficulties. Beginner isn't bad, intermediate isn't too bad, but the hardest version, both players have to be absolutely dialed into this game. If both players are down for that, it's a game that plays in 20 minutes, but during those 20 minutes, your brain is just burning as you're trying to think of the best way to make this objective happen. Number 22 is a solo-only game called Under Falling Skies. This game plays like a classic arcade game where these enemy spaceships are coming down onto your base and you are trying to blast them out of the sky before that happens and trying to get your research tracker up before they destroy your base. It's fundamentally a dice manipulation game. You're rolling dice, placing them on your board, which gets you energy that you need to fuel your ships and your research. The best part, in my opinion, is that there are these 2 blue robot dice, but this game has a campaign, so you play one scenario, and then you learn more about the story, which it's more about the game and less about the story. You get new mechanics, you get new cities that you get to defend as you go through this campaign, and the robots are revealed at some point in the story. So I won't spoil exactly how they work, but the blue robot dice are my favorite part of this game. Number 21 is a game that I was just gifted for Christmas this year, Architects of the West Kingdom. I have found that Garphill Games, anything that they make, I really want to try. I've tried this game as well as a few others, Raiders of the North Sea, although that was digital, and for this list I'm not counting digital games. but anything that this company makes, so far, I've really enjoyed. Architects of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game where players are competing to be the best architects and get the best favor from the king and be held in the highest regard amongst all the architects in town. You have 20 workers at your disposal, which is very unlike many other worker placement games where typically you have 2 or 3 workers and maybe you add a few more. This one you have 20 right at the start of the game, and you place them on the board and then you get something. And then when you place another one on that same action, that action is now better. You get more stuff. So the more that you take a single action, the better that action gets. That continues to grow until someone captures your workers there, which they can do at any time for the price of a couple silver. When you capture another player's workers, they go to your board, and then later you can turn them into the prison for money. And this is a mechanic that kind of ties the entire game together. Is you're trying to take these actions and make your actions better, but you don't want your workers to get caught, and you're trying to contribute to the cathedral, but you also want to deal in the black market, which is shady, and there's this tracker that shows whether, people respect you, whether you're held in high regard, or whether you're more infamous. Either way, you can still win, but it depends on whether you're doing more shady actions or more, good actions. Carcassonne, the game that invented the meeple. So that's a meeple. I think the story is that in 2010, there was someone playing Carcassonne, and they were referring to the little dudes as my people, and they just shortened it to meeple. And now a bunch of games use meeple. It's a pretty classic board game icon. But Carcassonne itself, if you've never seen it, it looks like this. You are looking at what Carcassonne really looks like. It's you pick up a tile and then you place the tile down in some way that it matches organically like this. Cities connected to cities, roads connected to roads. And then you have about 8 meeples and you can place them down. The best part about Carcassonne is when you try to sneak onto other people's cities or roads and score the points that they have worked so hard to build up and to be a high-scoring city or road, or when you make their city or road harder to complete by placing tiles down for them, technically earning them points, but also making it hard for them to max out on points. Give Carcassonne a try. It's a classic game, and it doesn't look as pretty as many modern board games, but it is such a blast. Plays great. 2 to 6 players, I think, is the most I've played it with. Number 19 is Sleeping Gods, the best Ryan Lockett game that I've played so far. I played this game this year with my friend and co-designer Chan. It is the best exploration game that I've ever played. You're playing as this group of people who have found themselves in a mysterious world, and you are discovering more about the world by going around the map, getting into fights. The game is played over 3 acts, where at the end of each act you have to fight a boss. In the end, a number of things can happen. There's multiple endings, and it's all about the story and the exploration. All of that is awesome. The 2 things that I think could be improved in this game, one of them are right here. There's these cards that you buy through the game that give you extra abilities, and they're all different, but you never really get rid of these. And so this is how many we had by the time the game ended, and it was like way too much stuff to remember. And then the other thing is that the combat could be better, and I believe he's making a sequel that he says that the combat is going to be improved, which I'm really excited about. Hopefully I get a chance to play that game. But the exploration in this game makes it so good enough to be my number 19 game. Number 18 is Legacy of You, another campaign game, except this one is solo only. In this game, you are trying to win 7 times before you lose 7 times, best of 13. In this game, you're trying to build 6 canals before you lose, and there is more ways to lose in this game than there are to win. So while you're trying to build the 6 canals, you don't want to run out of cards in your hand. You don't want the raiders to come and destroy you, and you also don't want the flood to destroy everything that you've built up before you can build the canals. The best way that I can describe why I love this game is I love the rhythm and the flow that I got into after about game 4 or 5. So the first game, I lost horribly. The second game, I spent twice as much time on that game than any other game because I really sat and like deliberated about what I was going to do next. And then after that, I kind of was in the flow of things and kind of knew what I was going to do, with still interesting things popping up, but I had my grand strategy in mind. And that flow was very satisfying. And this game was over after 7 wins. I went 7-2, and it did not overstay its welcome, which was awesome. There's story cards and things that change that make the game fresh and interesting. And I honestly can't wait for like a year or two from now when I've forgotten enough about this game that I can replay it and it'll be mostly fresh, because this one is a winner. Another Garfield game, great game. Number 17 is Viticulture, the first worker placement game that I ever played. In this game, you are trying to have the best vineyard, and you are doing so by planting grapes and then harvesting those grapes into your crush pad and then turning that into wine, and then finally fulfilling wine orders and selling your wine in order to get points. Now that is a lot of steps to do to teach someone a worker placement game, but if someone knows worker placement, this is such a fun game. I have found that I'm more into the little cards that are different. There's visitor cards. When I first learned this game, there was so much going on that I like completely ignored those cards. And now that I'm a little more experienced with board games, I've found that those cards are actually my favorite part of the game. Number 16 is Gloomhaven Jaws of the Lion. This fell 11 spots, I think mostly because I didn't play it this year, but the group that is playing Arkham Horror is planning to play this game next, and I'm super excited about it. This is the closest that you get to a dungeon crawling RPG video game in a board game. And kind of back to the discussion of video games versus board games, I don't know why I prefer to play something like Gloomhaven over a video game, especially because Gloomhaven has a lot of back-end stuff that you're doing. So as you're playing, you have to manage what the monsters do, you have to manage the board state, you have to manage when things spawn, you have to manage your character all on top of that, and you have to know the specific rules about when and where you can fire a ranged weapon and all sorts of stuff. For some reason, I find all of that extremely satisfying to like know how to do and pull off. And luckily in this game, only one person really has to know how to do that stuff. Everyone else can just worry about their character. So I'm really excited to play this game again. The best part about this game is that each character is extremely unique and has their own deck of cards that they are managing and upgrading throughout the game. And each card has 2 parts, a top part and a bottom part. The bottom part usually has to do with moving around the map, and the top part usually has to do with combat. And these cards are so fun and satisfying to play. I cannot wait to play this game in 2024. Creature comforts. When I was talking about Everdell and I mentioned the game that had cozy creatures, that's worker placement, that I preferred, I was talking about this one. This game has had the second highest climb out of any game in my collection. It moved up 13 spots from last year. I really discovered my love for this game this year, and it was primarily because of a couple friends that I played with, and they really loved it, so we played it a couple times in a row, and I finally saw what the game was trying to do, and I finally started having a lot of fun with it. And I'm so glad that they pulled it off the shelf and they were really interested in it, because it's one of my favorites. In Creature Comforts, you are playing as competing animals. Competing is a strong word because the theme is that whoever has the coziest home by the time that winter comes wins. So you are collecting pots of tea, rocking chairs, board games, soup, all adding it to this tableau that has these combos. Once you kind of start going down one rabbit hole, you know, oh, I've got this rocking chair. It sure would be nice to have a quilt to go along with it, that kind of thing. And you're upgrading your base. And then the worker placement is all done with dice. So you roll your dice and that dictates kind of where you're allowed to go. And I find that aspect of the game really interesting. There's a little bit of push your luck of like, okay, if I can roll these specific numbers, I can have a really good turn, or should I take a slightly safer route and do it this way? Very satisfying, cozy game to play. Little bit of rules overhead, once you get past that, amazing game. Number 14 is The Quacks of Quedlinburg. This game is a blast. If you've never played Quacks of Quedlinburg, you should give it a try, because what you're doing is you're trying to brew the best potion, and in between turns, you get to add ingredients that you buy to your bag, and then you are drawing these out and adding to your potion. And all it is a push your luck game where each token that you have has its own little special scoring thing or special ability that happens. But I have never seen someone have a bad time with this game. I think that this game might not go higher than 14, because the first game and the second game and the third game that you play this game are going to be like the best games ever as you're kind of discovering it. It's still my 14 game. I'm still down to play it whenever, but I will always remember those early games when I was like, what did I just play? That was awesome. Let's play again right now. So that's Quacks. Number 13 is Wavelength. This game is an amazing conversation game where your eyes are always on the people around you, which is such a great game for socializing and parties and things like this. What you do in this game is you get this weird dial-y thing that you see up there, and you get some kind of dichotomy. And you spin the dial, and your marker is going to land somewhere in there. And then based on the dichotomy, for instance, good guys versus bad guys, sweet versus bitter, you have to give a hint that's going to make the other players guess where that dial landed on the board. This game has just led to some great discussions. I've played this game for hours and hours on end with groups of people who like, this was the activity. I mean, like, we got together and this is what we did for the night. And it was just fun the entire time. If you've never played Wavelength, give it a try. Number 12 is The Crew, The Quest for Planet 9 combined with Mission Deep Sea. I've played both the games. We beat Quest for Planet 9 this year, and we almost beat Mission Deep Sea. We were like 3 missions short. The Crew is a small box trick-taking card game that has moved up 24 spots. This game has moved up more spots than any other game this year. Last year, I wouldn't have told you that I disliked it, but I would have told you that I might get rid of it. And now it's my number 12 game of all time. This is a pretty standard trick-taking game, but it's fully cooperative, and you have certain missions that you're trying to do. So this person needs to win the blue 2, for example, and this person needs to win the green 9. And you have to manipulate these cards and understand what all the people around you have without talking and revealing what you have. And I included this picture that I found. Almost all the pictures that I've had on this slide are from like Amazon sale pages. The ones that are on like tables and stuff are often pictures that I just took over the year because I'm a huge nerd and just take pictures of board games. It's like my entire camera roll. Anyway, this picture over here that says wholesome fun for family and friends, I included that because this could not be any less true for The Crew. At least with the group that I play with. The part that frustrated me is like how bad I was at it when I first started playing. I played this with my in-laws who are really good at trick-taking games, and I got called a donkey sandwich while playing this game. People were mad. I was mad at other people, and we finally had a game that we sat down and played through the entire game, and we really dialed in. There was 3 of us that played it, and I just had a blast with it. And we were really confused at first what you're allowed to say and do in this game, whether you're allowed to like kind of like hint at stuff. And for that game, we totally took all that away. We said basically no communication at all other than what the game allows. And we still went through the entire game, had an absolute blast. I think I prefer Mission Deep Sea because there's more variety in the kind of things that you're trying to win. But the original Crew has more levels, and we flew through all the levels in Mission Deep Sea other than 3 in one day. So I do wish that Mission Deep Sea had like twice as many levels. That was a little disappointing, but you can kind of make your own levels. The Crew. Amazing game. Number 12. Number 11 is a game that I just played for the first time maybe a couple months ago, called Bonanza by Uwe Rosenberg. Uwe Rosenberg is one of the most prolific game designers of all time, and this is my highest rated game, I believe, of his. There he is, pictured there. I love that the collector's edition or whatever of this game came with a picture of Uwe Rosenberg, because one of my friends opened it and was like, who is this guy? Is this part of the game that we have to know who this guy is? And I was like, honestly, yes, you should know who Uwe Rosenberg is. This is a game all about beans. You're trading beans, you're harvesting beans, you're turning beans into money. On your turn, you plant 1 to 2 beans from your hand of cards that you are not allowed to rearrange. So you have to play the ones that are in front. And then you get these 2 beans that are up for trade, and then everyone's trading with you. And this is another game like Chinatown where I don't know why I like this. I think 2 years ago I would not have liked this game. I think trading games and stuff like that would have given me too much anxiety, which maybe one day I'll start to like hidden roll games, because those I don't like because they give me too much anxiety. But for some reason, suddenly I like trading games. And this game gets so chaotic as people are just like begging you to take their beans. And like every once in a while your mind like breaks and you're like, we're talking about beans here, and everyone's getting so heated. It's just hilarious. Like, please, I'm begging you to trade me this bean. For the amount of rules that are in it, it has so much fun gameplay. I imagine that this one is going to be a hit for a long time. Now, I mentioned earlier that I realized this year that I love small box card games. I believe I had 16 or 17 on the list. Arboretum is my highest rated small box card game of all time as of December 31st, 2023. Arboretum is a game in which players are trying to create the best collection of trees in front of them, which means that they have trees that are in runs of numbers, sequential numbers, or at least increasing, and the ends of the runs are capped by the same types of trees. This game is the second most elegant game I've ever played, and perhaps the second best designed game I've ever played, in my opinion. It is so tight and cutthroat for the low amount of rules and how pretty the game is. But basically, you are trying to score as many points at an equal rate that you're trying to make everyone else have like the worst turns possible, because you're hoarding cards that they want, but you only have 7 cards in your hand, and you need certain cards to make sure that you can score your points. And it's just like a teeth-gritting game that you honestly don't even want to take a turn, because you know that the turn that you take is just going to be so like frustratingly fun. This game didn't move at all from last year, which I found is interesting. It was number 10 last year. It's number 10 this year. I think this is the only game that did that. But, you know, that just speaks more to it. I basically doubled my pool of games, and Arboretum stayed at number 10. Cartographers is a game that I love, and it's number 9. And as you can see, it has won the Silver Award. So that means that last year it was my number 2. This is the first game with any award that we've seen so far, and it's because it moved down 7 places. I still think Cartographers is amazing. It's just not in my top 8. So Cartographers is a game where you are trying to draw the best map. There are these 4 scoring categories, and you flip over a card that's going to have some Tetris-shaped piece, and you have to fit it somewhere on your map. And it's fun to get to draw little shapes and stuff and make the map look like yours. I don't know if everyone kind of enjoys seeing their own doodles and handwriting and stuff on games, but I always find it so satisfying. And then there's also these monster cards where you get to ruin other people's maps, which, at least in my group of friends, we like to draw like the worst possible ugly looking monster on their map while the other person was trying to make like a nice beautiful map. This game is easy enough to teach and quick enough to play, and certainly unique enough that it's so cool seeing people's reactions to. I personally love it. I think the reason that it fell is because it used to be one of my favorite solo games before I truly opened the world of solo games this year. And now I play it exclusively multiplayer because the solo mode is basically just a high score run, and there are better things for solo. But with that being said, great, amazing game. Gonna be saying that for every game from now on if I haven't already. Cartographers. Number 8 is Too Many Bones. Now, Too Many Bones, I didn't really want to be a Too Many Bones person because the game didn't interest me at all when I first heard about it. I didn't like the way that it looked from what I saw. I didn't like that the map that all of your battles happen on was only a 4x4. I wanted a game that you could kind of move around more. But I kept hearing about how this game is so good to play solo. And again, for some reason, I would rather sit down these days and play a solo board game than a solo video game. And so I finally cracked and gave it a try, and I got it this year. And I only got it less than a month ago, and I've already played maybe 15 or 16 hours of this game. This game is so much fun. It has a straight up intense amount of rules overhead. It took me 4 hours to learn the game, which I've found is not necessarily a bad thing for me, especially for solo games. But there's so much going on and so many rules, and if there's any reason to not like this game, that is certainly it. This is certainly not an elegant game, but it's one of the best games I've ever played. When I was making this video, I told myself that I wouldn't be allowed to play Too Many Bones until I finished the video, and like that motivated me. Like these past few days I've been working on this. Too Many Bones is the kind of game that it takes 4 or 5 hours to learn on your own, but when you teach it to other people, you can get them up and running in 15 to 20 minutes, I'm sure. I hope to play this with some other people in 2024. Basically what it is it's a video game like RPG on the table that you play over the course of 1 to 5 hours, and then there's a campaign that you can string all these different scenarios along together. So I'm sure that takes like a couple days, honestly, to beat the whole thing. But you have this certain character that has these abilities, which are represented by dice, and you get experience and you level up your player, which lets you roll those dice and you attack these monsters. And part of the reason, like I said, that I didn't want to like this game is because I wasn't attracted by this 4x4 grid. It felt too like small and lame to me. I have found that there is a lot of strategy and stuff that they've fit onto this tiny little grid. A lot of little movement and making sure that you're positioned right. And then after you go through a certain amount of days in the game, where you fight a bunch of enemies in the wild and you do all these interesting little quests, you finally get to face the boss, and if you beat him, you win, and if you lose and you've run out of days, then you lose. And I've lost this game a couple times, and I've won this game a few times, and every game it has thrown surprising events and stuff at me that I've been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that they threw this into the game. I would not be surprised to see it even higher next year. This is the highest that I really could justify putting it, considering that I just played it for the first time like 3 weeks ago. That's Too Many Bones. This game is definitely a lifestyle, expensive game. Not a game that I would recommend unless you've tried it, but for me, this is one of the lifestyle games that I will invest my time and money into. Number 7 is Spirit Island. Spirit Island is pandemic bumped up to the max. So I said earlier that I've gotten a little tired of pandemic. I don't like that there's quarterbacking involved and things like this. Spirit Island solves all those problems by having each player have their own unique character and their own unique deck of cards, and making the game so complex that you really can't tell other people what to do because you're already struggling with what you're doing. So basically what Spirit Island is a game where you play as spirits protecting this island from colonizers. So the colonizers act kind of like the diseases in pandemic, where they explore and they grow and they hurt stuff and they kill the natives. And overall, they're just nasty, nasty things that you want off the board. Big boo to the colonizers. And you play as spirits that get to destroy the colonizers and work with the natives and try to fight all this bad stuff off. And this game is, one, extremely hard to beat, and two, extremely hard to learn and pick up and play for the first time. It's another game that if you know someone who knows how to play it, I'm sure they can teach it to you quickly, but it's a lot of rules overhead. If you have never played Pandemic, for sure play Pandemic. Then, if you like Pandemic and you're like me and you kind of want an extra challenge, you want something more interesting, something that doesn't involve quarterbacking, Spirit Island is the way to go. My number 7. Another reason that I really, really like this game is that it's one of my favorite games that my wife really likes too, and we can play together and cooperate. Number 6 is a game that we got for our wedding this year as a wedding gift called So Clover. We also played this at the board game convention. That's where I first learned this game. This game has just been a constant hit at so many social gatherings with so many different types of people. My friends have really liked it. My family has really liked it. So, in So Clover, players are each given a Clover whiteboard and 4 of these clue cards that they place onto it in a random order. And then they are responsible for writing a word that matches the 2 words on each side of the clover. So, in this example over here, you can see that space and pilot, you might use astronaut to connect those. Or skate and game, you might use board to connect those. And yes, I did plant those cards so that I would have somewhat easy hints, because usually it's a lot harder than that, and you have to get a lot more creative than that. So once every player does that, you then go one at a time, and the players around the table have to guess what the orientation was that these cards were in this board. It's a very much an eyes up game where people are looking at each other, if not banging their head on the table, trying to figure out what this hint is. If you're the clue giver, you have to watch as they're like inevitably getting your hints wrong. Or on the bright side, sometimes they get a hint finally and it finally clicks and they look at you like, you're a genius. And you know what? Part of the reason that people play board games is for opportunities to feel smart and clever. And So Clover is a game that provides a lot of that, and a lot of laughter, a lot of fun, and a lot of communication, cooperation, being with the people you love. Number 5 is Terraforming Mars, which moved down 1 spot this year and would have moved further if I hadn't played it recently with my brother-in-law. I find that this game is a little hard to get to the table because it's such a big rules overhead, and some people I've found it's not their favorite game, but I really, really like this one. So in Terraforming Mars, you are working with and against the players around you in order to terraform Mars by raising the temperature of the planet up to a livable amount, raising the oxygen on the planet up to a livable amount, and creating 9 oceans of water on the planet. So there's 2 versions of this game, Ares Expedition and Terraforming Mars. I got Ares Expedition as retail therapy, admittedly, when I was having a particularly bad day at my last job, and I went to Target, and I honestly thought it was an expansion for Terraforming Mars, and I bought it, only to find out it's its own game. But it's basically the same thing, boiled down to more of a card game, whereas the original has a lot to do with this board. Other than that, they're pretty similar. It's an engine building game, so the decisions that you make early on really matter in terms of making your production go up. You want to play cards that are going to get you more stuff so that you can play better cards in the future, so that you can terraform Mars the best. I got this game in college, I think as my 21st birthday gift from my then girlfriend, now wife. And at the time, especially in college, I was a huge space nerd. I'm still a space nerd, but in college, I was a big space nerd. And this was one of my early board games that really got me into the hobby, and it's a real winner. Number 4, barely didn't make the cut to get a medal this year, is Orleans, but it's still impressive because it is my highest rated new to me game in 2024. And this game was gifted to me pretty much completely blindly. My friend went on Board Game Geek and he found a game that seemed like people like it, and he gave it to me, and I had honestly never heard of it. And we played it, and I had an absolute blast. And I've played it a few times since, and every time I'm constantly more and more amazed by what this game is. So, Orleans is a worker placement game that has an interesting twist where your workers are blindly thrown into your bag when you acquire them, and then on your turn, you pull out a certain amount and you place them on the action board in front of you, and you need the correct workers in order to do an action. Unlike most worker placement games, this one you need usually 2 or 3 workers in order to do an action. And what I really like about this game is that there's a little bit of so much going on, and all of it feels like just the right amount. You are racing on these tracks to get the furthest on these tracks, to get certain bonuses before other players, and each of these tracks also gets you a worker, which may be good or bad. Maybe you want more or less of those workers, so you're also managing how many of a certain kind of worker that you have. And there's this map movement thing, so there's this spatial puzzle going on. There's these upgrade tiles so you can get new, better actions. Every time that I play Orleans, I am more and more impressed by it and more impressed by the design and like the game more and more. And as a game designer, I'm so glad that I found this game because it really taught me a lot about balance and what you can do and the right amount of luck and strategy. Now, if you do ever play Orleans, especially if you play it more than once, I found that someone recommended that instead of putting all the upgrade tiles in, you should only let people draw 3 upgrade tiles and then choose from those 3 and then put the other ones at the bottom of the deck. Otherwise, there is a problem with this game that players can kind of go for the same strategy every single time that they play, and that kind of mitigates that. Now, if anyone has played Orleans and has tried the expansions, let me know if they're good. I haven't really looked into it because this is my number 4 game of all time, and I'm obviously interested, but I haven't really heard much about them. I don't see this game talked about too much these days, but that's Orleans. My number 3 game of all time as of December 31st, 2023, winning the bronze medal for the year is Dominion. And this game, if I had been making the list longer, would have received the gold medal probably 4 years in a row. I love Dominion. I was introduced to Dominion in college, and it completely got me into the hobby of board games. But before that, it just got me into Dominion. I didn't realize that, I was going to get so into board games. I thought I was just going to get so into Dominion. So before buying new board games, I just bought all the Dominion expansions. And luckily, I still love it. Still one of my favorite games. Dominion did move down this year, although I would be surprised if it ever dropped out of my top 10 because I've played 300 or more games. I've played digitally. I've played physically. It's one of my go-to gateway games for people who haven't played a ton of modern board games. Still to this day, people are constantly amazed that, oh my gosh, this is awesome. I didn't know that board games could do this kind of thing. And what Dominion is a deck building game, credited as the first deck building game, and in my opinion, it is still the best. Players have 10 cards, and all of them are really bad at the beginning of the game, and on their turn, they buy new cards, and then on subsequent turns, they can take actions, and then buy new cards, take actions, buy new cards. There's a little bit of attacking other players, but not so directly like in Star Realms, where it's literally just shooting each other until one person is dead. This game has a certain end condition, and then at the end, whoever has the most points wins. It gets a lot of criticism for that, for being kind of bland. The theme is a little bland. The game looks a little gray. People say that there's games that represent the hobby better than this one, and I would probably agree with them, but it doesn't matter for me. This game is still awesome. I will play Dominion till I die. So I mentioned that I bought way too many Dominion expansions, and I own everything that has come out for Dominion. And you can see on the far left of your screen, that is my actual stack of Dominion games. It stands at about the height of maybe like your average 4th grader. Like, it straight up takes up too much volume in my house. And I honestly think that that's why it doesn't hit the table too often, is that it's stored in all these separate boxes. So I really want to make a storage solution where I put all the cards into one box and everything's nice and easy to take out and get the cards out and hit the table more often. And who knows, maybe it'll win another gold medal one day, maybe it'll win a silver. Maybe these games that are higher than it are just things that are hot right now, and the games that are more like true classics that like really stick out will end up getting more medals in the end. But for this year, that's my bronze medal winner, Dominion. Number 2, my silver medal winner of this year is Cascadia. It went up one place. Last year it won the bronze, and I have found that I like this game more and more every time that I play it. I play this game about equally solo as I do with other people, maybe a bit more solo. And when I talked about Arboretum, I mentioned that that game was the second most elegant game ever designed. I think that Cascadia is the best designed, most elegant game that I've ever played. It is so clean, so easy to teach, but the skill cap is incredibly high and you can get incredibly good at this game, and I find the puzzle so satisfying. So what you're doing in Cascadia is you are choosing one of these hexagon-shaped tiles to place into your area connected to all the other ones that you've already played so far, along with one of these animals that goes on it, and then there are different scoring conditions that change between games that get you more points for this little puzzle. Very abstract as far as the theme goes, but what the theme does do is it just makes it even more of a cozy, warm, comforting game. This is very much my comfort game. When I want to just sit down and relax and chill, I have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and I sit down and play a game of Cascadia. And I think that what I like about it the most is that the decision space gets more complicated the more that you play. And one thing that I forgot to bring up with Catan, which is another reason that it has kind of fallen out of grace with me and isn't one of my favorite games anymore, is that the most important decision that you make in Catan happens at the very beginning of the game when you place your first 2 settlements. And from then on, the strategy doesn't matter as much nearly as it did in that very first thing that you did, which is very not welcoming for new players, especially for a game that should be, introducing people to the hobby. It's so popular. Cascadia does the opposite. Cascadia, your first few turns don't matter as much, and the decision space is so much more limited. There's only a certain amount of places that you really can put your tiles, but by the end of the game, you're trying to pull off these point combos and get these things wrapped up that you've been aiming for all game, and your decision space has grown exponentially. You have so many places that you can place this tile and this animal. I don't know if Cascadia will scratch the same itch for everybody as it does for me, but I think that everyone should give it a try. I think it deserves to be a gateway game that people teach as a way to introduce people into the hobby of board games more, and at least for me, this is an absolute winner. I honestly could see it going up even more. I could see this being a contender for a gold medal winner in the future. But for now, that's my silver medal winner of the year, Cascadia. My gold medal winner for 2023, moving up 5 places, is Hadrian's Wall. And from the second that I first played this game, I just started spouting praise of why I love Hadrian's Wall. Now, unlike Cascadia, I would not recommend this game for people who are just getting into the hobby. I wouldn't even recommend this game necessarily to people who are in the hobby. It's very much whether it's your taste or not. But for me, I think that this is the greatest game of all time. It gives me the best satisfaction to play of all time. And this game, like Terraforming Mars and like a few other games that I really enjoy, is very much an eyes down game. In fact, you can play it multiplayer, but even playing a multiplayer is a very solitary experience. You're mostly focusing on your own stuff. I play it solo and multiplayer. I've heard some people strictly play it solo, but I do enjoy seeing what other people are doing and kind of all like sitting and quietly doing our homework. And the reason that I make that joke is because I've received multiple comments from people who've played it about how much it feels and looks like everyone in the room is like sitting and like doing a math assignment. Everyone's quiet, so focused on what they're doing, and that sounds so unappealing. But the same people who told me that also said, I really like this game and I would love to play it again. But like the vibes are taking the SAT, okay? So in Hadrian's Wall, you are a Roman general somewhere along the wall that Emperor Hadrian built, and you are guarding your little fort that you have there. So you have two massive sheets of paper with so many little details, and the one that I always play on the left, at least, it's over there, is your wall. So you have to place guards there, you have to build up the fort itself, you have to build up your chippy. Here's also where you score for the game, which there's 4 different scoring categories. And then the other sheet, which is the more interesting sheet, but for when you're learning the game, you can honestly ignore like at least half of the sheet, which is kind of funny, is the town inside the wall, where you are dealing in trade. You have performers and theaters and gladiators. You have priests. You are dealing with diplomats in the baths. And this game has a ton of combos like Gone Shown Clever. That's pretty clever. If that game was Yahtzee boosted up to a 10, this game is Gone Shown Clever boosted up to a 10. It has so much going on, so many little details to look at, but is so satisfying to play. Now, this game would still be in my top 10, I believe, this year if that's all that it was, but it also comes with a campaign, and that's where this game truly shines. The campaign gives you specific objectives that you're going for, and trying to figure out how you are going to get from nothing to hit those objectives is one of the most, if not the most satisfying puzzles that I have ever done in my life. You have to sit there and know the game pretty well, and then come up with a game plan on how the heck you are going to accomplish this goal. I've lost more than I've won trying to do the campaign. If it means anything to anyone watching, I am doing the campaign on normal difficulty and trying to get the extra objective every time I do it. And I am currently on level 7, and I've done 1 through 6 all perfectly. And I've gotten there probably after 20 attempts or so. So I've got a lot more of this game coming up in the future. But they're coming out with a sequel for this game. I don't know if it's a direct sequel or more of an indirect sequel, but it's the same publisher and the same designer, Bobby Hill. And from what I hear, it's more of the same. It's going to be Hadrian's Wall cranked up to a 10. And I could not be more excited. I am easily more excited about that board game than I have been about any board game in the past. That is going to be so awesome. And I do wonder if it's going to kick Hadrian's Wall off the list, or if I'm going to have to combine them because they're so similar. I don't know. We'll see. But for now, that's Hadrian's Wall. Can't wait for the sequel, The Anachrony. My gold winner for 2023. My number 1 board game of all time, that's Hadrian's Wall. So that's my top board games of the year. I wanted to quickly talk about my resolution from 2023 and my board game resolution for 2024. My 2023 resolution was to play every game that I own, because I don't want to just keep acquiring games and not playing the games that I own. And I mostly accomplished that goal. I didn't play Risk, which I give myself a little bit of room there, because I mostly own that game because it was my favorite game as a kid, and it's not realistically going to hit the table too much. I also didn't play Call to Adventure, the Stormlight Archive this year, and that one I just straight up regret. I really need to give that game more attention. My 2024 resolution is to get more games moved up on my chart that I have for where I'm at in board game design. So in my opinion, there's a few levels. There's ideas of mechanics, and then there are full game ideas, and then there's an early prototype, and then there's development, and then there's publishing your game. And I have 1 game in development right now, and I have a lot of games that are in this idea phase, and I have nothing anywhere else. And so I want to at least pitch 1 game to a publisher, or create a game on Game Crafter, or in some part, like, get it out of my hands, like feel like it's done and it's good and I'm proud of it. And then I want to get a few more games up to the levels of development and, get further along in that journey. As long as I stay into board games, I plan to keep doing this video in the future. I watch so many people's top 100 board games. People that have like 0 subscribers, I'll watch their top 100 board games. I'm like addicted to these videos, so I felt like I kind of had to make my own. And yeah, thanks for watching my top 100 board games of all time. See you next year.